Well, good morning, everyone. Yesterday when I got the news, it was very shocking, and thinking of a sermon to preach on was very difficult, and everything I had thought of didn't seem right. But one thing kept coming back into my mind. Before I dive into that, I want to talk about this and how there's beauty in this, that, as Christians, we don't have to go through anything alone, which I think is a great assurance. And Christianity, or life in general, would be terrible if we had to go through anything alone. But it's in community, through coming together around the table with each other, where we can get through things. And that's where Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn." It's an invitation for us to mourn, but also to mourn alongside those who are mourning. And we're all mourning a little bit today. But coming together, we can be comforted in that. And I was thinking of that led me to today's text that I want to talk about, because I was searching for a passage to talk about or something, and nothing just seemed right. But my mind kept coming back to the same thing, and that was Psalm 23. And Psalm 23 is something that kind of popped up, and I was looking for text, and I was like, this is what we need right now, because there's not any words I can say that make us feel better, not anything I can give that will shine light on this, but what we need is comfort and peace. And this passage, this Bible passage, this psalm is one of that, where we can see and we can feel that comfort and the peace. And thinking about Psalm 23 got me thinking about my personal relationship with Psalm 23. Because each of us have relationships with different verses in the Bible. Maybe it's a Bible verse you remember, the first one you're able to memorize, right? Or a Bible verse that you heard at a camp or at a convention or a sermon that just stuck with you and has been in your mind ever since. Well, Psalm 23 is one of those. I remember I was in elementary school, and I memorized it as part of our class I was at for the Christian school I was attending. We memorized Psalm 23, and I think I was in first grade. And it's been in my mind ever since. So for 20 years, I've known this psalm, and this psalm has been in my mind constantly. And it's something I've come back to quite a bit. In high school, and I was in 4-H for a little bit, I had sheep for a little bit, and so I understood some of these shepherding analogies. In college, our teachers talked about, pastors as we're shepherds to the flock, and talked about shepherding as an analogy for leadership. And specifically, the most poignant thing that stood out to me was a class I took on the prodigal son, talking about that passage in Luke 15, and how the Psalm 23 and the shepherding culture is deeply entwined in the Bible. And if you look to the Bible, there's shepherding values and beliefs all throughout the Scripture, all throughout the text. Abraham was a shepherd. Moses was a shepherd that led Israel through the desert. David was a shepherd. Jesus is called the Good Shepherd. Shepherding is something that we see all throughout the Bible, and something we can embrace and talk about. And today, it felt perfect because, talking about green pastures and darkest valleys, today is the day where we feel like we're in a dark valley. And the psalm rings true. And for me, looking back on my life, I can tell the times where I was in the pasture. I can tell the times where I was in the dark valleys. And this psalm always rings true. This psalm is one of encouragement you can give to somebody when they're in the dark valley or in the green pasture. And I think it's one today that I think we need to hear. Not just for me, I think, as a church, we need to address these things. And as a pastor, our jobs are to intersect with what's going on in the world and what's going on in our church. And this is one way I think that we all can kind of lament together and mourn together and be comforted together. Because Psalm 23 is a personal psalm, and it's a psalm meant for us and to show us the personal God we have, which is beautiful. You look at these words and the pronouns throughout it, and it's I, he, you. It's very personal, It's not our Lord, it's my Lord, my God, which I think is beautiful because, we have this idea, this belief that God is a corporate God, a God for all of us, but he's also an individual God, a God who wants a relationship with each and every one of us personally. He wants to sit down and talk to you. He wants to be with you. And this psalm shows us, and it's beautiful. And I think it's reassuring when we're in the pastures and reassuring when we're in the valleys. And it's something we can hold on to as a testimony. It's a testimony for who God is and who we are in relationship to him. So what I want to do today is we're going to go through the psalm, and we're just going to read through it, and I'm just going to kind of dissect it and take it apart and give you some assurances and some thoughts that I had while talking about this, because there's not really much more I could say about this. Thinking yesterday, trying to think of a sermon, I was thinking, I had so many thoughts in my head, but I couldn't get any words out. And in times like these, words are very hard. But that's where the Scriptures come in. There's Scriptures that can breathe life and breathe comfort and breathe peace into us. So if you all will turn to Psalm 23, and I just want to read through this, and we want to soak in these words before we dive into it. So Psalm 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So the Lord is my shepherd. I think the beautiful thing is here is that it's not about us. A lot of times when we read the Bible, we turn it all about us. How are we? But this passage is about the Lord. It's about the Lord as our shepherd, talking about him. It's saying that, yes, we are sheep, but the Lord is our shepherd. And, and it's a personal thing. He's my shepherd. He's not, he is our shepherd, but he's my shepherd. He's guiding me, and he has a personal relationship with this. And looking at this, we can see the testimony from David's life. David maybe wrote this psalm when he was a shepherd, when he was in the field with his sheep. But it's something that's personal, right? And it shows these underlying values, the connection he has. The shepherds, they had a relationship with each one of their sheep. They cared for every single sheep individually, as something valuable. And the thing about sheep is that they're completely dependent. They have, sheep cannot really survive on their own. They're completely dependent. They need a guide. They need a shepherd to help us. And sheep are very fearful animals. They scare and they jump at anything. And they need security. They need a guide. And that's what we have in some of their shepherd. It's their guide. It's their security. It's their comfort. It's something that is there to help them out. And it shows that our God, Yahweh, is personal. He's our shepherd, and he provides for us. And the next part of it, I lack nothing. It's just, beautiful to it, is that with him, with our shepherd, we don't need anything. We have everything we need. And it's something that, we talk about as Christianity is contentment, which contentment is a word we hear a lot, but we don't really understand. Contentment isn't being, I have enough stuff. Contentment is, I have enough. And contentment also does not mean happiness. Contentment means being content, finding peace where you are. And, even in the sad times in life, we can find contentment, because we're with our shepherd, because he is with us. And it makes us not want, We're in this world where, we want more. We want everything. We want, more and more and more. We think we can find contentment and peace in that. But there's peace in, contentment in the Lord and contentment in our shepherd. We don't need anything more. All we need is our shepherd. And the shepherd, which is one of the beautiful things about this, is shepherds are willing to die for their sheep. They're willing to lay down their lives for their sheep, You see that Jesus laid down his life for us, the flock, and the shepherds are willing to die for their flock. And our shepherd is willing to die for us and willing to protect us with everything that he has. And it shows us the personal God. And it shows that David is speaking, to us, and he's helping us through this, showing, his imagery, as him as a king of Israel, he was a shepherd. When he was a shepherd, he was a shepherd. And he sees that, above all this, even though he's the king, he was a shepherd, he sees that God, Lord, was a shepherd. And he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. The main job of the shepherd was to lead the sheep to places where they could grow, places where they could eat, where they could be healthy. They could eat, drink, run around, be healthy. And the focus isn't on, the places. It's, the sheep. It's beneficial to them. Sometimes they have to go through dark valleys. Sometimes they have to go through dark places to get to the valleys and pastures. But it's beneficial for them, right? And, he's making us lie down. We think about this, and I thought about this quite a bit, The most vulnerable position we are in as humans is when we sleep, When we sleep, we are at the most vulnerable we are. But, our shepherd, he makes us lie down. He makes us sleep, but we don't have to fear because he's with us there. He protects us while we're laying down, while we're vulnerable. He protects us. And his presence allows us to rest. It's the simple presence of the shepherd that allows us to rest, It's not anything else, we're, as sheep, we are vulnerable. But as our Lord, he protects us. And it's his presence that protects us, nothing more than that. And it's contentment, having him as our shepherd, contentment to have him lead us there, Shepherds will lead the sheep. The sheep wouldn't lead, tell where to go. The shepherd would lead them to the safe places, to lead them to green pastures. And he leads us beside quiet waters. And waters is a place where we can find that living resource. Jesus talks about himself as the well of life, someone who can give us life and give us life with his living water. And thinking about water, this is another thing that stood out to me this time, which, sometimes you read the Bible over and over again and something stands out to you, like after you read it 50 times that you've never seen before. But thinking about quiet waters. First thing we see is that sheep, they didn't really like rushing water because, if it's strong enough, water was strong enough, they could rush them away. And they're also kind of skittish. They didn't like loud noises or anything. So they needed quiet waters. But this got me thinking, we all have gone to a waterfall or a nice little creek. It's nice to sit beside a nice little creek and listen to the water trickle. It's just peaceful. And there's a calm assurance in that. But the thing with that is, water has always been something that's not been peaceful. back in, the old days, water was seen as chaos. Before they had the map of the world, the water was just the end of the world because it was chaos. There was uncertainty there. One thing we talked about in one of my classes was about chaos comp, which is just chaos of the water. Water is just chaos. We see, people are scared of the water. Sailors, they have, there's big beasts that lie beneath the surface of the water. There's mystery there. Even with all our technology today, I think they said we only discovered like 10% of what the ocean has to store. We have such a little amount of what the ocean has. And we've only been to the bottom of the ocean, I think, once or twice, but we've sent men to the moon about a dozen times, which is just crazy to think about the water and how powerful it is. But the Lord, our shepherd, he gives us quiet waters. Just as Jesus in the New Testament quiets the waters with his disciples, he speaks peace over the waters in the chaos of the boat. Our shepherd does that. Even if the waters aren't calm, he calms them for us. And he gives us that soothing place where we can grow, places where we can be there. And he seeks out that calmness for us, where we can be refreshed, right? Talks about, he refreshes my soul, and he guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Now, this word refresh, in the Hebrew, it's an ongoing word, where he's constantly refreshing my soul, right? Which I think, is beautiful. That, the shepherd, his presence is a constantly refreshing source. It's not something that we're one and done, It's not a once on Sunday morning thing, come back the next week. It's a constant refreshment. And it's this time where we can go, and give him our burdens. And looking at this, it's talking about when we're weary, tired, exhausted, he will carry our burdens for us, and he will even carry us if we need to. If the sheep would grow too tired, the shepherd would pick them up and carry them. If the sheep were injured, he'd pick them up and carry them. They would not be a burden to him. They were his prize. He would take care of them. And looking at this word refreshes, one thing that stood out to me too was talking about this was that the word also has a meaning of gentle touch, which sometimes, a gentle touch from someone you love can be a refreshing sign. And our shepherd, his gentle touch to his sheep is refreshing, And the sheep, we talk about this, sheep have a very personal relationship with the shepherd, They're intimate with the shepherd. The shepherd sleeps with them, he lies with them, he touches them, he pets them. And so a gentle touch from your shepherd can be reassuring. And our gentle touch from the Lord, sometimes we feel it, sometimes we don't, but he is there and he's willing to extend us a gentle touch. And we all get this because we know the shepherd, right? The sheep know the shepherd's voice, which is a beautiful thing. This reminded me of my little sister. She got ducks a couple years ago, and she raised them from when they shipped them to us. And so the day after they hatched in the egg, they shipped them to us, and we got these little baby ducks. And my sister pretty much raised them. And it was to the point where she could whistle, and the ducks would come running to her. Wherever they were on the farm, they'd come running. And that reminded me of that, The sheep know the shepherd. They talk about, the shepherds used to come to pools of water, and they'd get 3 or 4 different herds of sheep would be in there all mixed together. But the shepherd would go stand off in a direction and call, and his sheep would come running. And all the other sheep would stay, but his sheep would come running towards him, which is a beautiful thing, right? He calls us, and we need to know his voice. And how do we know his voice? By being close to him, by being in him, by seeking him out in his word, seeking out Christ and God in the word, getting to know them. And the more we hear his voice, the more we know it. So whenever we hear it, we can come to it and run to it and be refreshed by its presence. And we see that God is guiding us. The shepherd is guiding us. If you don't know anything about shepherding, it's done differently than a lot of animals. When we think about cattle drives, the westerns, they have the cattle in the middle and the cowboys are all behind and back of them, beside them, driving them, pushing them in a direction. But with sheep, it's different. With shepherding, there's one shepherd and he's out in front and all the sheep following behind him. And the sheep follow the shepherd. They don't lead the shepherd, they follow the shepherd. The shepherd guides them and they go where he goes, which is a beautiful thing because, they go where he goes. The shepherd finds the right paths. He finds the right places to go. You know why he does that? Because he's good. We see for his name's sake. Because God is good, he leads us on good paths. He guides us on good places. Because the shepherd cares for his sheep, he's going to take them through places where they can get them to the end goal, to a beneficial place. And, looking at this, it also says, he brings us back, right? If we get lost, he still comes look for us and brings us back to the right paths. Because we cannot guide ourselves. We must surrender to the fact that we cannot guide ourselves. We cannot save ourselves. We cannot do anything about our salvation in this life, but we can follow the one who is. We can follow our guide, Jesus. We can trust in him to lead that. And God's providential guidance will lead us to something beneficial. God's providential guidance will guide us to something good, which is interesting because that next part, talks about the darkest valley. Sometimes you have to go through dark valleys to get to the pasture. Sometimes you have to go through dark valleys. And everyone who's lived knows that at some point in life you're going to go through a dark valley. It's just one of those things that you're going to go through in life. You're going to go through darkness. You're going to go through a hard time. Because even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So this is an assurance, saying that we will be going through dark valleys. And even when the dark valleys are places where the predators lie, where there's danger, where there's stuff around, it's a scary situation, right? But it says that I will fear no evil, because we know that he's walking beside us. And we can all know in the darkest valleys, that's the place where we cling closest to the shepherd. I was reading on this talking about, in the pasture. In the pastures, we can run around. We can go where we want. Life is good. We can run around. And that's often when we drift away, The shepherding, culture, they say, like, when they're in the pasture, that's when the sheep would wander away. When life was good, when you're in the good place, that's when the sheep would wander away. But in the dark place, in the dark valley, that's when the sheep are on the knee of the shepherd. And if you ever had a dog or a pet, when they're scared, they're right on your side. You can't shake them. They're right there. Why? Because they want safety. They want that security of your presence, of your touch. And if I think we're in a dark valley this week, and it's that experience, where we just need to cling to the Lord. And the dark valley, I think shows us our own mortality, shows that we're temporary, shows that, we are not for this world. We are just traveling through. We are sojourners. We are pilgrims. This world is going to be scary. There's going to be times where we're facing, dark valleys, deserts, wildernesses. But if we cling to the shepherd, he will guide us through to a beneficial place, to a place past this temporary darkness, to a place past this temporary pain, to a place where there will be no evil. Because for now, there will be evil in this world. There will be evil around us. But what we need to do is fear no evil. And we have confidence in this. We have no fear or concern, which is something we see all through Psalm 23. There is no fear. There is no concern. There is no worry. Why? Because the shepherd's here. The shepherd's here, and he's going to take care of us. I don't have to fear. He's always there, and he's with him when we do not have to fear, which is a beautiful thing, because we cannot escape him, which is something we see in, Jonah, for you are with me. Jonah tried to escape God. He tried to run away from God's presence, which that Bible, I believe, is in this. The book is in the Bible to show us, you can't escape God. You can't run away from him. You can't hide from him. He's going to find you. He's always there. He'll be there. No matter where we are, he is always there. And I think the thing with here, with me, with God, when God is with us, we see it, there's empathy from God. God is so much different than we are, and it's hard to explain God because the only thing we can use is metaphors that only describe a part of God. And then even when we describe part of him, there's still more left to be desired. We can't get a perfect picture of who God is, but we know that God is with us. We know that God is different from us, but we know that God feels pain. We know that God understands and feels pain for us. Because we see that, when Jesus died on the cross, God felt pain for that. God feels pain when Israel would sin against him and fall away from him. God felt pain when they were crying out in Egypt. So God is with us. He feels for us. When we are in pain, he feels that pain. I think it's a beautiful thing, when we are facing trials and tribulations, God is feeling the pain with us, and he's there with us, and he's trying to comfort us and seeking us out, as a shepherd does. And we're talking about a rod and your staff, right? God is with us, and he has his rod and his staff, which are two pieces that shepherds use. The rod is used for protection. It's shorter, and actually I had a teacher bring one in once to a class, and it's used for throwing, also used to check over the sheep for insects or parasites that might be lingering on them. And the staff is more the traditional shepherd's crook, was used for direction. Now, both these were used to help get the sheep from point A to point B, help to protect the sheep and comfort the sheep. They were to rescue, protect, and guide, right? And it shows us that God is an able protector. He has the tools to protect us and guide us, and he's willing to use them, And the comforting tools, even though sometimes they might be used for discipline, it's only because we get ourselves into trouble. If we get ourselves caught in a bush, God has to use his shepherd's crook to get us out of there. If we get ourselves into trouble, God has to correct us and use his rod and his staff to comfort us. But even the tools used for discipline are comforting when they're there, when they are used because they come with the shepherd there, right? And it's beautiful there. And it shows us the direction God's there, and he's willing to comfort us, The law of God is a comfort to us. And we see this in the Psalms. David talks about this, how he has a love and a desire for the law of God. And he falls in love with the law of God. And we look at that, and that's why David was a man after God's own heart. Not because he did the right thing, because David did a lot of wrong things, but because David pursued God. And I think the word we need to look at, in the Valentine's Day, he wooed God and was wooed by God. He was someone who was passionate for God, for his word, for his law, for the Bible. That's something we need to do, right? We need to be wooed by God. We need to seek out God in the Bible, in the text, and seek him out and be wooed by him, be moved by him, seek comfort in his words, at all times, and pursue God as a lover, right? Pursue God, with everything we have. Pursue God, with all we have, because he is our shepherd. We should want to follow him with everything we have. And the interesting thing here I saw, looking at these two stories, is that this is a break in this passage. From the first 4 verses, we're talking about a shepherd. And in the last 2, we're talking about a banquet host, which is something I never thought about. The first four are talking about a shepherd, then there's a transition to a banquet host. And we see that God, he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. This is all banquet language. This is all in the ancient culture of celebrating and having a banquet. And we've seen that God is more than just a shepherd. He's more than just a protector. He's also a provider. He's there to provide for us, right? He's a feast maker, He's giving us a banquet. In the Gospels, a lot of times the kingdom of heaven is talked about as a banquet, as a feast. And that's the way I like to think about heaven, is as a banquet, where there's just people there and we're celebrating God, we're feasting, there's an abundance, and, we have everything we need right there. And we see that God's preparing it. God's preparing this feast. He's preparing his favors and blessings for us, which, you know what that means for us? We don't have to do anything. If God's preparing the banquet, we don't have to do anything. We just have to show up. We just have to be there for him, Because even, when we're in the dark places, in the dark valleys, God is working with us, In the presence of our enemies is the same style of text as saying, through the darkest valleys. Even when there's bad things around, God is preparing us. He's giving us favor and blessings, and he's preparing a place for us, preparing a feast for us. He's all we need, and there's a day coming where he is all we'll have. And then we see this text, you anoint my head with oil. This is also a thing that we see with kingly status, right? David was anointed when he was a king. Jesus was anointed before he went to the cross. But it's more than that. I've learned that, even honored guests at banquets were anointed, with some oil. So thinking about this, we're not sheep anymore. Before we were talking about a sheep. Now we're honored guests. God is making us honored guests. He's inviting us into his royal priesthood, his honored place, and he's anointing us. He has invited us into his court, giving us the blessing, giving us the lavish treatment, all God has for us. Talking about this reminds me of two specific miracles in the New Testament of Jesus, the water to wine and the feeding of the 5,000. And in both those, Jesus doesn't just provide enough, he provides more than enough. He made more than 150 gallons of wine and made more than enough food to feed 5,000 men, more like probably 15,000 people. And there's enough food for 12 baskets of leftovers. So he didn't just meet the bare minimum. He exceeded. He provided way more than enough, an abundance of resource for us. And that's the thing God does. He doesn't just give us just enough. He gives us an abundance. And I think the best way to look at this is through what Jesus did in the cross. God's grace is so deep that we cannot out-sin God's grace, which is a beautiful thing. No matter how much we do, we cannot out-sin God's grace. There's so much abundance there. Talking about our cup overflows. He anoints us. He gives us more than we need, an abundance, so much more than we ever need. And surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Looking at this, we see two words, goodness and love. A lot of times it says goodness and mercy. But these two words have a common thread, which I think is the best way to describe God. And that is the word hesed, which is a steadfast, unending love. And a lot of times people look at God, and if you were to describe God in one word, we probably have a bunch of different explanations. But I think a lot of people think when they describe God, the word love is one that often gets bumped down the list. But when we think about God, the only thing we should think about when we think about God is love. God is love. God's love is his undying quality all throughout the scriptures. Even though God acts in anger sometimes, out of vengeance, out of justice, it's all through love that he does it. You look at the Bible, when God does things, it's because people did things, so God reacted to them. He didn't do things just because he wanted to. He did things because people acted. But his love is underlying quality of that. He withholds punishment from us. If God really wanted to, he could have ended us a long time ago because we don't deserve his love. But he loves us so much that he continues to love us with this, And the word follow there. The word I looked it up for that is actually pursue. And when it's talking about pursue, it's talking about one animal pursuing another to hunt it. And it's a pursuit, it's a pursuit. It's not just following, it's a chasing after, a chasing down, a seeking out for everything else, right? And thinking about this, it reminded me of the Lost Parables. In the Lost Parables, we see three parables, which a lot of people think it's a trilogy, like three stories, put together, but it's actually more like three acts of a play. The Lost Parables are three parts of one story. We see the lost sheep and the lost coin, where the person, the shepherd, and the woman go crazy trying to find their lost item. They search everywhere. They pursue their lost item with everything that we have. And this is that pursuit God has. He seeks us out. He follows us because he wants us there. He chases out to meet us. And we see in the parable of the lost son, the father runs out to meet the son. He pursues out to meet the son. And it's something that will follow us all the days of our life. God will follow us no matter where we go, no matter what we do. All we have to do is be pursued by him and accept his pursuit. We can't escape it. And then we see this phrase, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And we think about the word dwell, and one word I think I see here is return, which is another call to the lost parables, right? Everything is returned. And when the thing is returned, there is a great rejoicing. We're not in the house of the Lord now, but we will return there someday. But even if we, aren't returned yet, the house of the Lord, talking about this, David is talking in temple language and tabernacle language. We know that David was going to build the temple, but God said not to, and Solomon built it. But we see that David then, knows about the temple language, where God resides, where God is residing in a physical place. But God doesn't reside in a physical place anymore. He resides in us. So we are the house of the Lord. We are the house of God, and we reside. God resides in us if we reside in him. And it's something we can have forever. And the word forever also means all the days of my life, which is a beautiful thing to know. As long as we pursue God and are pursued by God, we will be with him for all the days of our life. And recently I read through David's life in 1 and 2 Samuel, and he had a lot of ups and downs. He had a lot of pastures, and he had a lot of valleys. But the one thing I noticed reading through that was every time David was about to do something, he'd always ask, Lord, what should I do? When he's being chased by Saul, he says, Lord, what shall I do? And he always puts things in God's hands. When Saul's life is in David's hands 2 times, and David says, no, it's the Lord's. I'm going to leave it to the Lord. When David's being chased by his own son, he asks the Lord, God, what should I do? And he always has that instinct to seek the Lord when he does, no matter what he does, in the good times and the bad times. He seeks the Lord, which is a beautiful thing. David went through his pastures. He went through his dark valleys, but he always sought the Lord. And he was always a man after God's own heart. So we see Psalm 23 as a psalm about a God who cares for us, cares about us. And it's a God who wants an ongoing, intimate fellowship, a relationship with us, one where we can walk with him, walking in the garden, walk with him, talk with him. Just like Adam and Eve had in the garden, right? They had the beautiful experience of being able to walk with God, literally walk through the garden, talking and spending time with God. And although we can't physically walk through the garden with God, we can still walk with the Lord and get to know him by studying the Bible and praying to him and getting to know him. Because our only hope for life and eternal life and security, is in the shepherd. It's our only hope, the only thing we have to hold on to seek it out, right? And in an uncertain life, God offers eternal comfort and eternal peace because he is the good shepherd. Because the thing is, God is going to give us time in the valley. He's not going to, shut us off in the valley. We're going to go through valleys. And everyone in here can testify to a time when they were in a valley. But the thing is, the shepherd has us covered. Even though we may not be able to make it through the valley on our own, we have a shepherd there leading us and willing to carry us if we can't make it. Because the shepherd is one who stayed in God's presence. Shepherd is the one who saw God's power, and the shepherd is one who experienced God's leading. And we can learn this from the shepherd. We can get this from the shepherd if we just seek the shepherd with all we have. Because a good shepherd provides. A good shepherd leads me safely. A good shepherd strengthens me. A good shepherd, even in darkness, keeps me comforted. A good shepherd blesses me, and a good shepherd is there every day. And we've heard this story about the shepherd, and we can seek out the shepherd in our life from God, right? Because Psalm 23 is not just a psalm, talking about some deep theological view, some deep, biblical truth that we need to hold to. Psalm 23 is a personal psalm. These words are personal. We can read it, and we can feel the power because those words aren't just, words talking about, something can't relate to. They're words we can relate to. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. Something we can hold on to because we can become sheep and follow the shepherd. And we can embrace Psalm 23. And this is the thing that I encountered yesterday, trying to think of a message for today to give, to speak to you guys, because we all need some comfort today, and we all need some peace today. And these words just stood out. Words that have always comforted me and always will are the words that come from us, from a shepherd, about the good shepherd. Even though this text was written 1,000 years before the birth of Jesus, David knows that the good shepherd is the Lord. And Jesus became the good shepherd in the flesh to walk beside us in life. He went through life. He experienced tragedies like this. Remember, he saw his friends die. He was able to go through life, and he knows the pain we're going through, right? And we see at Jesus' human, he experienced this with us. But the thing is, we can seek the shepherd, and the shepherd will comfort us. So as we close, I just want to do one more thing. I want to read through this psalm one more time, and then we'll sing the closing hymn. So if you would, I'd just, like for you all just to close your eyes and listen to these words, right? Just listen to these words and let them speak to you. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and mercy and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So as you leave today, I want you guys to remember this psalm. And as we close, you're going to be singing a psalm, and the song is going to, help us. And I found that this morning, as I was getting ready for here, I was walking around in here, listening to worship music on my phone, and I just felt at peace. Even at this time, we can feel peace through worship and through singing praises to our God. So let us worship and sing praises to our God together. Will you please rise and sing with me?